Welcome back to Coach-to-Coach. Today's guest is Gary Chupik from Elite Mindset. Gary is an international speaker, writer, professional member of the Association of Applied Sports Psychology, certified professional leadership coach through the ICF, ordained minister of 28 years, and chaplain of the Seattle Thunderbirds for 7 years. Gary's long list of clients includes the likes of Houston Texans, Washington Huskies, Idaho Vandals, Stanford University, USA Figure Skating, Seattle Mariners, Limitless Minds, and many more. Thank you for joining us today, Gary. It's my pleasure to have you as my guest.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. So the way I like to start these things off is just to ask what first sparked your interest in coaching?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I think I was coaching before it was ever a thing.
Mm,
And so before it ever had an official title, I just figured out that, if I want to bring the best out of people, I wouldn't be telling them things. I
mm,
would be asking them questions. And so I kind of adopted that model pretty early on in my life. And so coaching, sort of the formal aspect of it, I think came pretty easy to me.
yeah, it's interesting. Reading your intro there, in many ways, I think two other words for coach could be ordained minister and chaplain.
Yeah, I think even being on a platform, over 1,000 times, I've always gravitated toward asking questions even from the platform
Mm,
as opposed to telling people what to think
yeah,
and just posing questions and letting people wrestle with things. And I think that people come to conclusions far quicker if they wrestle with something rather than being told something.
yeah, yeah. My coach has a saying, which is um, the only thing that's going to make a difference for somebody is an insight that they have for themselves.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
it's
well
pretty aligned
said.
with what you just said. So yeah, I'm really curious to hear more about your practice, what you do. I rhymed off a long list of your clients, so I'm sure people have a sense for kind of the area you're in, but who you're working with, how you're helping them, that whole thing.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I would say, as sort of a general overarching theme, I would say that I unlock people
Mhm.
and unlock people and potential, and that was originally in the I guess in the religious world, I guess is the easiest way to say it. And after I started to get a lot of my uh, professional credentials, and then I was working more and more with athletes. And so I worked with athletes for a few years, and then more and more people in the business world started calling me, which I was just like totally confounded by that. But after I thought about it a little bit, what it takes to be a professional athlete and the mindset necessary to be successful in that is very similar to what it takes to be a successful business person.
Mhm.
You still have to have emotional regulation. You still have to have confidence. You still have to be able to, reset often. Like there's so many similarities. And even between the sports, I would say 80% of it's the same in terms of mental performance and 20% unique to that sport. But I would say it's very similar to business. And in fact, what's really strange too is I'll have moms that call me and say, "Hey, I'm struggling with, leading my family, or I'm struggling with the culture within the four walls of my home. And
Yeah,
how do I improve the culture of my family?" Like it's just so interesting to me. And so many of the principles are transferable to different environments.
yeah, yeah. I really loved your reset often kind of idea. I always naturally, in my former career as uh, a leader in the grocery analytics industry, always pointed to New Year's as kind of a natural reset. Like it's one of those things. And then more recently in my coaching, it's kind of like the opportunities to reset. A new week, a new day, a new game, a new challenge. Your next breath. Like there's an infinite number of opportunities to reset. So I'm curious when you say reset. I know I have a pretty clear idea of what I think that means. What does that mean for you and the folks you work with?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate sort of your perspective on macro resets versus micro resets
Mm,
because I think it's really valuable. And I think one of the secrets to resetting often is just understanding that you can reset after a conversation. Even after our conversation here this morning, both of us can hit a reset and go on to our next thing, fully engaged without, bringing in the positive or the negative echoes of a previous conversation. And it's
mm,
kind of like a goalie in hockey. Like you let in that goal and you have to reset so quickly.
Yeah.
and it's just done in a matter of a few seconds. And goalies, I think, are a really great example of that. A pitcher in baseball might be another good example of that, where they're resetting after every play. And I think we can do that after every conversation or every task that we do, so that we can be fully present in order to be able to accomplish that in a timely and in a professional manner. So what that looks like with my athletes, sometimes just meeting with me is a reset,
Mm.
for an athlete. But if I can teach them that they can reset more often in their sport, then they can sort of take control and have more control and efficacy over, what they're thinking and how they're playing as an athlete. For me, what it looks like is going into neutral thinking after someone resets. And so that neutral thinking is a determination that my positive feelings may not help me in my present situation. So, for example, this is a ridiculous example, but
Those are the best kind.
imagine a football team scoring a touchdown in a crucial moment and celebrating too much. So
Mm.
there's a ton of positivity around in that moment, but they celebrate too much. Then the extra point, the kicker has to move back 5 yards. They miss the extra point
Yeah.
because they were back too far or something happened, and that celebration or that positivity just went a little bit too far. Had they gone into neutral thinking, they would have said, like, let's not over celebrate here because we got to worry about our next play. And so I think that neutral thinking, which I think is actually part B of
Mm.
the whole reset thing. If you can go into neutral thinking and say, listen, that last or previous conversation was negative, it didn't go very well. I'm feeling sort of achy from that in my soul. And but you have another meeting in front of you, and that person deserves your very best.
Mm.
And so that going into neutral thinking right away as quickly as you can after resetting can be really, really helpful. It definitely helps with the negative thinking. Like if you have negative connotations or negative echoes from a previous conversation and you hit that reset button, it can be really helpful. But even if it's positive,
Yeah.
so that neutral thinking really, I think, is the secret.
Yeah. I love that distinction because, we often, I don't know if it's a misunderstanding or misinterpretation, thinking that like there's all this value to positivity. But what you're pointing to is the value of neutrality, right? It's that I'm sure in certain circumstances that positivity may or may not be helpful, but resetting back to this neutral position, I think sounds like a great, and it sounds to me very analogous to what I might refer to as being present or being in the now. You're not thinking about the past or the future or what's happened or what's going to happen. It's just resetting back to the present moment and
Yeah, I
starting
think
over.
I think that's true, and I think sometimes there can be a tendency to think that that is not genuine or
Mm.
disingenuous. But I don't think that's really true. I think we can set aside times of our day to reevaluate what has gone on in our day, and so I teach something called postponing your feelings,
Mm.
or scheduling your feelings. So
Yeah.
I don't have to feel the depth of everything that I'm experiencing in the present moment, that I can say, you know what, every night before I go to bed, I'm gonna make I'm gonna set aside 15 minutes so that I can think through what happened in my day and learn from those things.
Mm.
Or it could be waking up in the morning and and replaying some of the previous day. I mean, however somebody wants to do that.
Yeah.
But the whole goal of failing is to learn, right? Failure is feedback, right? Like
Yeah.
it's data.
Yeah.
And so if we have it, if we're not evaluating or sort of thinking about that feedback, and like you're a statistics guy, like if you're not really thinking through the statistics and you're not letting it just sort of hit you a little bit, then and you're not learning from it and you're not making any changes from it, then all it is just negative emotion.
Yeah.
But if we can attach like a healthy response to a negative, feedback or a negative, event, then that becomes very useful to us. So I think that neutral thinking and then postponing our feelings or scheduling our feelings so that we are in the best position to learn from that moment, I think is an optimal situation.
Yeah. The thing that's coming to mind, I saw a video the other day. It was like, I don't know, top NHL prospect failures, kind of, so top picks that came into the league and didn't really pan
Yep.
out. And related to what you were just talking about, like I can imagine a lot of these players as their career developed, they were always the best, always the best, always the best, and then they get to the pros and now they're not the best, and they have to, and they don't know how to deal with failure. They're internalizing it. They're not learning from it, and from some of the stories I saw, it seemed like the failure kind of consumed them and derailed their careers entirely. Whereas the players that can get in there, um, adapt and learn from their new situation, find a role on the team, et cetera, et cetera. They're the ones that flourish and make a long career out of playing in the big leagues.
Yeah, adaptability is incredibly important. I mean, I'll often talk about is it better to be tough or is it better to be adaptable?
Mm,
And, imagine two boxers, one's tough and one's really adaptable.
mm,
And, I would put my money down on the adaptable boxer any day of the week,
definitely.
because they're going to adapt to their opponent and then attack from there. So, being adaptable is incredibly important.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I'm curious if you can share some, specific example. You don't have to share names or anything, but just examples of your coaching, kind of the results or the impact you've had on people, or whether it's sports or business leaders, and some of the results you've got from that.
Yeah, well, there's two in particular. One of them is in business where, we often talk about how important coaching is. And a lot of people think that to get a mental performance coach, you have to be not doing well, like
Mm,
there's something wrong. And it couldn't be further from the truth. It's so wrong. What oftentimes I do is they'll take someone who's really good and they just want to get better. So they're always looking for that cutting edge. So Pete Carroll and were talking one time, and he just said, Gary, the best always want to get better.
mm,
And I think that's so true. It doesn't matter if you're Michael Jordan or you're just entering a professional league or a college league or otherwise. The best always want to get better. So they put their ego aside for a moment just so that they can work on what is going to make them really good. So that kind of attitude, people like that are a real joy to work with. And that was expressed in a relationship I had in business where there was a gentleman who had paid me $100,000 to coach him from Las Vegas. And so I'm coaching this guy, and in our second session, I'm in his office in Las Vegas, and I was coaching him through a situation, and then right in the middle of our conversation, about 10 minutes in to our session, he asked me to leave his office. So he
mm,
had a glass wall. I go out into the foyer and breezeway, and I'm just kind of like watching him on the phone, on his computer, on the phone, on his computer. And then he waves me in about 10 minutes later, and I'm thinking, what is going on? I am so confused.
yeah.
And I come back in and I said, so yeah, tell me what's going on. And he goes, oh, you just made me $1.2 million. And I'm
Mm.
like, wait, what? What happened? And I said, well, like what happened? He goes, I just didn't see something until you helped me see it.
Mm,
And and I wanted to take action on it right away. And so there's an example of someone who was incredibly eager to put into practice something that he had learned, and he wasn't going to let any time go by. And that story has been so inspiring to me, because that kind of eagerness to learn and eagerness to grow, and just the urgency that he saw this in was just so refreshing for me. And I thought that's how true champions think.
mm,
They think differently.
yeah.
Whereas the average player would say, well, I'm okay. I'm fine. I don't need mental performance coaching, or I
Mm,
don't need. No, no, no. The best always want to be coached. Russell Wilson talked to Trevor Moawad, his mental performance coach, 365 days a year,
mm,
like literally every day of
yeah.
the year.
Yeah.
And so they had this really great relationship, and Russ wanted to stay sharp mentally, and it required constant attention. So if someone that's playing a sport at the highest level or in business at the highest levels, if they appreciate that voice in their ear on a regular basis, even a daily basis, then how much more would someone like you and I benefit from that, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so that's one example in business.
Yeah, I love it. I love that story. The two thing one came to mind. I've often thought of myself like when people ask, you tell people you're a coach, and oh, is that like a life coach? And often the thing that's been in my head is like, no, it's more like a coach for life. So like
Well said.
each one of us is living a human experience, and there, we have trials and tribulations, we have goals and objectives, and that doesn't change whether you're, you know, in the prime of your career or you're retiring or, out doing errands. I mean, you're having a human experience, and the opportunity to have somebody like a coach that can, like in the story you just told, help you see something that you couldn't see for yourself. I mean, it may not get you $1.2 million, but there's lots of tangible benefits to having that other perspective that you can't see for yourself.
Yeah,
I love
agreed.
that.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And there was another athlete that was on the fourth line in hockey, and I knew he was better than what he was playing. He
Mm,
knew that he was better than how he was playing. So he went from playing on the fourth line and, and he had improved pretty quickly after working with me. Like it was pretty evident pretty quickly.
mm,
Within a week or two, he was playing on the third line. Within a week or two, he was playing on the second line. And within another week, he was playing on the first line. And then he led his team in scoring in the playoffs.
mm.
So, that mental part of the game is just so important. And it's not to say that skill and talent don't matter. They do matter.
Yeah.
However, you're never going to maximize that skill and talent if you don't have your head straight.
Yeah. Yeah. The I'm curious, and I don't know if you can put your finger on it or if there's one thing, but what would you say was the thing that made the difference for that player going from fourth line to first line? If you
Mhm.
could sum that up in one thing or a couple things.
Yeah, that's insightful. I would say for this particular player, it was their self-identification.
Mm,
So how did they see themselves? And the kid was, I mean, he was a good hockey player. Like, don't get me wrong, but he was fat. He was the fastest player on the ice.
yeah.
And so I think what happened was he got discouraged and started to slow down and overthink things. And I think the overthinking thing is pretty common, in
Yeah.
business and in sports. But for this particular player, I think for him to realize that he really was the fastest player on the ice, and he would, I just needed him to believe that
Mm,
and tell himself that, and then live that out, and just go, 100% every shift. And I think he started to embody that and believe that for himself. And
mm,
I said, what if you just leaned on your speed? Like, don't worry about any other part of your game. Like, don't even think about it. I
yeah.
just want you to just focus on your speed. And because I think instinctually he would play great hockey
Yeah.
instinctually, right? Like in my system, I'll say trust your training and trust your instincts. Okay, you got to trust your training
Yeah.
to make you a sound, hockey player, and you also have to trust your instincts. And so I think for him, trusting his instincts, once he started going was no problem. I think it
Mm,
was just getting his feet moving really fast. And so once he started to buy that, then I think he just began to get excited and he would score more, set up
yeah.
more goals and be more disruptive. And it was, I think that self-identification, what he believed about himself was the most
Mm,
important.
yeah. Love that. For whatever reason, I'm thinking like in hockey, I think of speed, kind of like in business, they say, uh, sales masks a lot of sins in the P&L. But like in hockey, speed can mask a lot of sins. Like you can cough the puck up, you can make a lot of dumb plays, but if you can leverage your speed, you can give up the puck because you can go get it back. Like it's okay. Like so I think that's kind of what was occurring to me there. But just going
Yeah.
back to your previous story, if I can, the other thing that really stood out to me, which I find in the work I do with a lot of people, is this. What I loved with the story is the action that your client took, and the fact that like he wasn't going to wait till the end of your session or your call. Like he was so action oriented. Not only was he going to take the action, but he was going to strike while the iron was hot, so to speak. So maybe you can talk about the role that taking action plays in the success that people have that you work with.
Yeah. I mean, intention always has to manifest in action.
Mm,
So I came up with this definition of mindset a few years ago. It took me about 7 years to figure out. And it was kind of like a physics equation. That's because that's just how I think. I
sure.
always think in terms of like formulas and plans and strategy. So I was like, well, how do I help somebody improve their mindset? And what if I could like break it down in such a way that I could isolate a problem?
Mm,
And so I created this definition, this physics equation. So that's sort of a broad definition of mindset that I think is generally widely accepted is mindset is a conditioned set of beliefs that drive behavior. So a conditioned set of beliefs that drive behavior. But my physics equation for mindset is this, is that you have an experience that you have in brackets thoughts and feelings about. plus your response to those things. Okay, so you have a response to the experience, you have a response to your own thoughts and feelings. So you might be feeling angry, but you can choose still how you want to respond to that.
Yeah.
So all of that, if you have that experience with your thoughts and feelings and your response, all of that equals a belief about yourself.
Mm.
Okay. So now I'm forming a belief about myself and how I handle things. And if you put all of that together in a sort of a, square brackets, all
Mm.
of that equals a mindset.
Mm.
And so when a player has, let's say, a less than helpful mindset, it usually comes from an experience that they had thoughts and feelings about, that they responded a certain way, that formed a belief about themselves, right? That is informed their mindset or created their mindset.
Yeah.
So I was sharing this with Andy McKay from the Seattle Mariners, and he said, "But it's Gary, it's missing something." And I'm like, "Oh my goodness, what's it missing? Please tell me." He goes, "It's missing an action or a behavior."
Mm.
And he says, your equation's perfect. It's beautiful,
Yeah.
but it's always got to result in a new and improved behavior. And I was like, oh yeah, it's got like a new and improved action or behavior, which if you really think about it, is like creating yourself a new experience because
Mm.
it's a behavior, right?
Sure.
So that's how you actually build a mindset is by giving yourself new and improved behaviors
Mm.
and so that you can have a new and improved experience, that you have new and improved thoughts and feelings about, that you have new and improved response to, that you have a new and improved belief about yourself with it, which results in a new and improved mindset, which results in new and improved behaviors, and you keep cycling around like that.
Yeah.
So that the change of mindset has to result in new and improved behaviors. And when you see an athlete doing that or someone in business doing that, then you kind of go, oh, okay, they're putting it into practice. It's like it's another way to learn. I think somehow we've gotten the concept of student really
Mm.
misplaced. Like I don't think it's correct because when we think of student, we think of sitting down in a desk in front of a chalkboard and hearing someone talk.
Yeah.
When in reality, learning has a lot to do with participating and
Mm.
doing. So I think when we can give our clients actionable steps that they can take that supplements, well, not just supplements, but enhances the learning experience, then they can really grow at an exponential rate.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. It's just making me think like watching my kids play sports when they were young. My daughter in particular, so she played soccer for, I don't know, 13 years or something. But early on, the first 6 years, it was a, disaster. Not just for her, but just it was tough to watch.
Yeah.
And then what happened was I think it was the Olympics, and the Team Canada won the bronze, the women's team won the bronze medal, but all of her and her friends and whatever, they watched all these soccer matches on TV, and they never really watched soccer on TV. And all of a sudden, they went out on the field and were, you know, doing the thing, emulating the things that they saw. But it wasn't until they actually did them and learned how, oh yeah, like kicking the ball to open space, that opens up the whole field, and like executing little plays and things. Um, but yeah, it was there was an element of learning by watching, but then it wasn't until they actually put it into practice and did those things and got better at them. And then the whole, I don't know, then it became really fun to go and watch.
Mhm. Well, it's fun to watch athletes or people in business get something, right? Like,
Yeah.
and you and I may not have the brilliance of saying anything intelligent, but since they put it into practice, it's a whole new level of learning for them.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, that's what I love about this job is, you say something to somebody and they internalize it however they internalize it. Like we rarely really even know what happened for them unless we ask them. But then they go and they play with that. They take an action and then they're learning kind of in their own way. Um, and so you can kind of connect the dots back to the coaching, but in a lot of ways it's kind of a like lighting a spark under somebody, and then they let the fire kind of run wild. So I love it.
Yeah, it's contagious. Like I think it boils over into other areas of their life too, not just
Mm.
on the playing surface. So, a lot of the players that I work with, if they're, let's say, in college or high school, which I don't work a lot with high school students, but but in college or pros, you just see it overflowing to different areas of their life. They're like, "Hey, I reset when I was at home with my wife," and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Well, great. How did it work out?" He goes, "Oh man, I'm so glad I had that tool in my bag, you know." And I'm like, "Oh, great." What about
Yeah.
the emotion, or what you taught me about emotional regulation? Like I was so hot and so angry about a situation, but then I realized, I learned the Yerkes-Dodson scale from Gary,
Mm.
and then it helped calm me down and whatever. And so just giving him and like empowering people to
Yeah.
take control over their thoughts and their emotions is so rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've been an athlete and a sports fan my whole life, and I'm always seeing how sports is a microcosm of life. Like everything I've ever learned in sports, whether as a player or a coach or a fan, is totally transferable to everyday real life things like you just talked about, relationships with your family, your spouse, your kids, your boss, the government, the whole the whole nine yards. So it's
Well, it's pretty remarkable. Like if you think about it, and I'm always looking for what works
yeah,
and it's efficient, but I can't name another thing that prepares young adults or youth or young adults for life better than sports. I just haven't found it. I'd love to be able to say our educational system, and I just don't think it's true.
yeah,
It's just not working like it's supposed to. But if
no,
you take someone who is really committed to their sport, and even if they never play at the college level or pro level, but just the idea of just playing and learning the fundamental skills of teamwork and resilience and how
yeah,
to regulate yourself and how to encourage when things aren't going well and how to reframe failure. And I mean, all these things, it's the statistics on it are remarkable. It's like 87% of all C-suite executives and CEOs played high school or college sports,
yeah,
and for women, it's 91%.
wow,
Like it's not even close. And even if those numbers, have a degree of error or whatever, it's still over the top ridiculous
yeah,
about how effective sports are at preparing people for life. And so I think it really matters. I think sports really, really matters. And I just can't find anything that does it better than sports.
yeah, yeah. I think you're bang on there. And like you said, even if there's a margin of error, I mean, it's still overwhelmingly uh, obvious the pros to that. So that's great. This might be a hard question for you, but if you had to take everything you've learned and implemented and had success with and boil it down to one thing that you'd want people to walk away from this, listening to this podcast with, what would that one thing be?
Well, if I could centrifuge it down to one thing, I would say, I would say this. I would say you cannot control outcomes, but you can always put yourself in the best position to succeed.
Mm.
And the reason why I think that's such a powerful phrase or thought is there's a lot of things in life that you can't control. And even if, let's say, you're a pitcher in baseball and you throw the perfect pitch at 105 miles an hour curveball, and you're just nipping the tip of the strike zone. I mean, it can still get hit for a home run,
Mm.
and you have no control over that. So I think being overly concerned about outcomes is overrated. However, I should hyper focus on putting myself in the best position to succeed. So, for example, I helped a long distance runner recently, and he finished in 13th out of 100. And so I said to him, I said, "So are you pretty proud of yourself?" He goes, "Well, yeah, I did a lot better than I had expected and whatever." And I said, "Well," I said, "What did you expect?" He goes, "Well, I was hoping to get in the top, 10 or so, but 13th, that was one of his personal bests."
Yeah.
And I said to him, "Well, let's just play a game for a moment. Like, did you put yourself in the best position to succeed with your eating?" So on a scale of 1 to 100, since there were 100 runners,
Yeah.
I said, "What place would you have finished in if we would have measured your eating habits, let's say a week before the race?" He goes, "Oh, I probably would have finished in 50th or
Mm.
60th." I'm like, "All right. All right. What about your hydration?" "Well, I did pretty good about 20th. "Okay, what about your sleep?" "Well, probably about 30th or 40th." I'm like, "So you're telling me that you probably should have finished in 25th or 30th or 35th,
Yeah.
but you finished in 13th. Well, imagine what you could have done if you would have finished in the top 10 in all three of those
Mm.
categories." So he didn't put himself in the best position to succeed.
Yeah.
He had an expectation or a hope that he would have finished in the top 10, but he prepared like he was going to finish 30th. And
Yeah.
so this concept of like even in hockey or in football or whatever sport that you play, there's a position to play, there's a role to play,
Mm.
and you have to know that position really well. But if you're not in position, no matter how good you are, if you're not in position, then it's going to be a failure for you and your team. So I think the big overarching principle is, yeah, you can't control outcomes, but work hard at putting yourself in position to succeed. And that means the same thing for business. It means other things in life. You can't control a lot of it, but you can always put yourself in the best position to succeed.
Mm. Love it. And I can already think of many places where I have room for improvement.
Me too.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I've loved this conversation. If people wanted to check you out, learn more about yourself or your elite mindset program, where can people find you?
Well, most of my clients hang out on Instagram, so that's where I am. And so on Instagram, I'm Elite Mindset. I have the blue verification dot. So kind of look for that. But yeah, Instagram Elite Mindset, all one word.
So, well, I appreciate you joining us today. I appreciate the CFL hoodie,
Oh yeah, go Riders,
Saskatchewan
right?
Rough Riders. So, my wife works at the University of Guelph, and they're just getting ready to see the Grey Cup because the Argos practice at their facility.
Mhm.
So they're bringing the Grey Cup over
Oh,
uh,
cool.
for a little event this week. So
Cool.
awesome. Anyway, thanks again. I loved catching up with you and sharing everything elite mindset with all our listeners. So thanks again, Gary.
It was a real pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome.